Welcome to the Data Strategy Show. My name's Samir Sharma, and I'll be your host for the next 60 minutes. My guest on the show today is Paul Morley. Paul is a data philosopher, a public speaker, and an executive at Nedbank's Enterprise Data Services, where he leads a team of world-class data professionals and is responsible for delivering Nedbank's regulatory commitments that govern the finance sector. He's also principal in delivering data analytical services to Nedbank's business clusters. With almost 30 years of experience in IT and data with IBM and Nedbank, he's been recognized locally and internationally for his participation, leadership commitment to innovative thought, and leadership in the context of the global data industry, and continues to be passionate and controversial about data and changing the status quo. He also loves walking around in his funky and colourful socks with no shoes on, as well as showcasing his extensive collection of loud and colourful shirts at the office. As you can see, he always tries to be different and does break the status quo. I hope you enjoy the series, and unfortunately, we won't see any of those colourful socks today. Paul Morley, thank you so much for being on the Data Strategy Show. It's wonderful to have you. Listen, Paul, what I like to do is just, work out who Paul Morley is. So tell me a bit about your journey to data. How did you arrive at where you are, Paul?
I think it was accidental in the bigger scheme of things. I worked for IBM for, 12 odd years, managing different components and dimensions of their business, and concluded my career at IBM as part of a leadership management SWAT team that flew around Africa, Middle East, Europe, recovering large customer engagements from an IBM perspective. And that included things like technologies, deployments, project management, financial contractual agreements, wherever there was a major bottleneck that inhibited the IBM business from moving forward, or they deemed as problematic in one dimension. I spent the last sort of 2 or 3 years in IBM in that career, doing that, and then ultimately I've landed up. Nedbank approached me, in essence, headhunted me from Dubai to come and manage their systems management integration on various internal projects. I sort of became an SME in the systems management integration space. And for the last, 17 years now, I've been at Nedbank and fulfilled many roles and functions, from systems integration to project management, program management. And obviously now I'm in the data space, and that's where obviously our CIO, our current CIO, thought I'd best fit. And I've been in the data space now for 11 years out of my 17 years at Nedbank. So I suppose it's accidental. I don't know what happened there.
That's all right.
I suppose it's accidental. Just my journey just worked out that way, and now I am where I'm passionate about data, I suppose.
Great. So listen, I think you sounds like you've got a really big portfolio at Nedbank that you have to manage, deal, lead. But just coming to that, because you've primarily worked on transformation programs throughout your career. What would you say are the top 3 biggest challenges that you see in transformation projects, specifically with data, around the sort of data transformation that you've been working on, whether it's integration, whether it's people, whether it's colliding data into a data warehouse or data lakes? What would you say are the top 3 challenges that you've had?
I think from that perspective, on any transformation program, because you're dealing with the unknown, the uncertainties and the ambiguities of an aspiration of where you want to go from today to tomorrow. And again, there's many dimensions, and certainly where I feel passionate, I'm very observant about, and which has stood me in good stead in a number of instances, is the challenges that you face is really got to do with first of all, the understanding of data specifically. If we contextualize it in a data transformation world, it's understanding across the board. So because the industry has driven this level of hype around data and all these new things in the fourth IA and the industrial age, a lot of people are misunderstand or misperceive those messages. And so understanding would be number one. The second one, in my view, would be fear. The inherent fear people to change, to go to a place of unknown, to go to a place of an aspiration without knowing how they're going to get there, what the benefit is, what the effect on themselves are going to be. So there's an inherent fear. So understanding fear would be up to. The third component is how the challenges we face is because of all this drive and uncertainty and fear and hype around data. What typically happens as a challenge is we dive into the end game first, which is a technology conversation. So the third component of that, if I can articulate in such a way, is we lose focus on the journey and rather want to discuss the end point. And I think we've had a number of conversations around, there's that old adage about people, process, and technology. First, you need to understand all dimensions. Do you have the skills? Are they trained? Are they aware? Do they understand? There's that dimension. And then there's the second dimension, which is the process of doing business. How do I do business? What is the process of doing the business? Are there issues in doing the business? Is business constructed appropriately to do the business? And then obviously there's the third leg or the third step or stage behind that, which is the technology. And technology is there to automate the process of doing business, which is the function of people driving the business. But the other one is we reverse the model. So the third challenge is we get confused. We forget about that journey in order, and we jump straight to the end. So it's the rush, I suppose, which would be the enthusiasm and the rush to get to the end. I think needs to be tempered. So in summary, I think it's the understanding, the fear, and the rush to get it done. And I think those are the biggest challenges that tend to drive issues in transformation projects. Sort of the three dimensions I would worry about.
And so let me just unpack some of that. So your understanding of data. So this is very much, and you talked about hype. You talked about the level that we are now as an industry, as a body of people, continuously hearing about AI, ML, IoT. Is that the kind of understanding that you're seeing as opposed to the understanding of foundational elements? What are those things that is making people think, oh yes, we're going to transform the way we do this bit of work, i.e. process, and we're going to layer AI on it because it's going to be super efficient and we won't have to do anything. Is that what you mean by the understanding of data? Or is it what data partly can do for you?
Correct. So I think it's a multidimensional question. So let's break down the understanding piece. So it's understanding what data can deliver to you and how it can enhance your product, business, or strategy. So it's we don't understand how that fits together. So we talk about monetization of data. Well, that's very difficult because data is always in the eye of the beholder. It's how you use it, how you implement it, how you present it, that adds the value. And data in itself inherently doesn't add value. It's a foundational component for value add. So that's the first thing we
so it's really understanding the value of data and its value to that individual or that team or for what decision is being made. Okay.
Correct. Yep. And again, if you use it, it'll add value. If you don't use it, it won't add value. And how you use it is very, very important. If you use data that's perhaps not compliant to privacy, if you're using data that could potentially expose your customer base or your product, if you're using data that perhaps specifically, and more importantly, when you dive into the advanced analytical dimensions, the AIs, the DLs, the MLs of the world, very, very important that you understand how you use it and what the outcome is. Because those models and that dimension of data is now an added complexity. And what I've seen is lots of people want to dive into those advanced capabilities without the inherent understanding of what their data is.
Correct.
Or what it is.
Yes.
Or is it of a suitable quality?
Yes.
Is it of a suitable span? Is it of a suitable velocity? And if you don't understand those basics, when you get into the automation, because now you've talked about, so that's the people component, the understanding of data. So let's just walk through that process. If you don't have your people don't understand the data, which deals in this analogy around the people, when you get to the automation, which is where the ML models and analytics sit, where you've got an unintelligent, uninformed, uncreative entity or system that now consumes that data and then reports an outcome based on a model, it could be wrong. So before you start getting into the how I'm going to add data, first you need to understand your data and where it is. Data quality. Do you understand the lineage? Do you know where it originates from? There's many questions that you need to, and that's again the people component. And so that's the one dimension of understanding. And the second dimension of understanding is once I have all of this data and I understand my data, and it's in a position or a place where I believe it's correct and it's contextualized and all of those good things. How do I use it now? How am I going to use this to drive my business, drive my business success, drive the bottom line? And this is now you start getting into the dimensions of what is your data strategy? How do you position strategies or data strategies within the bank? In my case, the bank. And support that. So there's the understanding sits on both sides, but you have to start with the first piece, which is the understanding the fundamentals, before you get to the second piece, which everybody loves to dive into.
Absolutely. And I think it goes to your final point on that in terms of the technology first principle. I always talk about that. Most companies I see or that we work with typically have started with that technology principle. First principle is technology. So they get all wrapped up in that. But what I want to do is, they don't really understand what they have, where it is, how it's going to help them, how it's going to help drive their strategic objectives. And they've run, way ahead thinking that they will use this piece of technology that will absolutely help them find those insights, and suddenly by magic it will appear and they will know what to do.
And again, I think that's the other part of the thing. People are looking for a silver bullet. They're all panicking. This digital age, the age of service beyond manufacturing. How do we service client centricity? They're panicking because they all know, and again, a lot of this is hype. Hype drives this uncertainty. Hype drives this urgency. And again, I often say to people, always remember that when you're going through these stages, so if you look at just the basics of the industrial, these industrial revolutions everybody talks about, because there's such an urgency, people want to revolutionize. They want to go from A to B, and it must be done as quickly as possible, because if they don't do it as quickly as possible, they're going to be less competitive, they're going to be outpaced, they're going to go obsolete. And again, that talks to the fears, which I mentioned earlier. So it's not just about the fear of people, the people that work for you. It's also about the fear in the leaders of organizations, the leaders who own organizations. That drives the fear. Now, the fear then becomes an overriding urgent factor. Now, because you've got this fear and this urgency and all of these other things, you now want to accelerate and jump to the end, which we talked about earlier, which is the technology piece, without going through the fundamental, the evolution. All transformation programs are evolutionary in nature. If anybody thinks that a transformation project is revolutionary in nature, they're wrong, and it's going to fail. And people, because of the hype urgency, are driving this level of data adoption, data perspective in a revolutionary way instead of an evolutionary way. And as soon as you get into that space, you start cutting corners. You further enhance the fear in people. You further enhance the fear in leaders. Even if it's done unintentionally, you are contributing to the fear. And the more and you land up in the spiral, this never-ending circle. So the more you try and push, the more you fail. The more you fail, the greater the fear, the more you push, and you land up in this never-ending cycle of a downward spiral that contributes to failures of data-orientated projects and programs. And so you've got to deal with the fundamental. You have to break that cycle of fear. And the only way to do that.
So let me ask you, as a data leader at Nedbank, and just looking at these three areas, and I think the fear piece is probably the biggest, because I'm looking at the fear piece as, not being, as you mentioned, just the people, but equally this whole thing about the fear of missing out. How do you, as a data leader, start to build that credibility of, listen, guys, we're not going to run. We're going to do this sensibly. We're going to do it in a fashion which is, I'm going to look at this through the lens of simplicity rather than complexity, because if I start to layer in AI on top of everything right now, it's not going to work. So there's a level of sophistication we can get to. How do you bring people who are absolutely fearful? And I think that the change aspect, because the change in the culture is probably the biggest killer of data programs, projects, etc. How do you start to bring them on that journey of evolution, and not as you said, revolution, because that's not the way that we should be running these programs? How, as a data leader, do you affect that thinking?
Well, again, I think it's a multidimensional question. The first thing is you need to deliver regular success. You need to celebrate the success. You need to put yourself in a position where you are talking and celebrating very small successes very early on in a regular basis, and let that tempo build over time. So don't be in a rush to do everything in day one. Rather start with something small on a regular basis. And that's how you build trust. And as soon as you build trust, a strange thing happens. Now, they are not mutually exclusive, trust and fear. However, when you start reinforcing the dimensions of trust, when you start getting your people and your leaders to trust the success that you demonstrated and the value that you've shown, once you start building that trust, you automatically find, on the other hand, the fear starts to reduce and people start to breathe and not panic and not knee-jerk. So for me, it's about showing incremental success, which is evolution. Now, most people get confused between evolutionary and revolutionary. They think, most people have the initial idea or thought that revolutionary activities will happen quicker than an evolutionary activity. That's not necessarily the case. It can still be on the same timeline. But the difference on the evolutionary nature is you slow down, you divide it into small achievable components, and you deliver on time on those commitments you've made. And just because we say it's evolutionary and revolutionary doesn't mean evolutionary is going to take longer than a revolutionary approach. But the way you approach the transformation is smaller, incremental successes that build upon each other. And through that process, you can remove or certainly dampen the effects of fear people in an organization or leaders have in an organization. So it's about building the trust. As soon as you build that trust connection, you'll find you'll get more support, more funding, more recognition, and that now becomes a positive spiral. So with more support, funding, and more appreciation, you deliver more, and it becomes sort of
the building blocks to success.
Unlike the fear side, which you can also get into, but they're fundamentally not necessarily different. It's just the way how you approach them. But you've got to show success, and you've got to build that trust.
So I think you're right, because a lot of times I've been engaged by a client. They've been very skeptical. They've had people come in previously who have not probably looked at it in a way that has been the evolutionary approach, the journey, the fundamentals, the foundations, as you talk about it. So they come from a level of, oh no, it's going to happen again to us. But as soon as they start, and I think that incremental value is hugely important, even if it's a really small bit of value. But that small bit of value may equate to a large bit on maybe understanding the customer. just to, small
Correct.
tweaks to enable them to do that. So, I think that's important for most people to understand in terms of how we walk through data innovation or how we help transform a company. And I don't think it's about radical transformation. I think it's about as you talk about a gentle step-by-step approach. But here's one thing I see a lot, though. I walk into organizations where they've been told that they've got to spin up a data science team immediately. How did you, in your current position at Nedbank, because I know it's been a pretty evolutionary transformation over, 3 to 5 years, maybe longer. What were the first things that you did in your position to say, okay, so what do I need now as in terms of a structure, an organization, a bunch of people to help me on this journey? What were the first things that you talked about in terms of a data organization?
The first thing I always start, and again, this has got to do with any sort of data initiative, be it ML, data science, BAs, architectures, solutions, cloud, digital. Before you even get to any of those components, ask yourself, I'll always ask the organization why you want to do it.
Yeah.
Because before you even start to run, let's just understand, do we understand why we want to do it? And don't even execute something if you can't understand why you want to do it. So let's, in this case, your question. So that's where I start. I always go, okay, I'm cool. I understand, but why? And if you can't articulate why, then you're not ready to do it, to be honest. And if you try and force it and you're not ready, it's probably going to fail because you're not going to get by funding. They'll probably see you as a cost overhead at some point.
Sure.
There's employment restrictions and there's times are tough. People don't have time to waste money or productivity on something that they can't do. So ask why. So when you start building a data organization, again, you started small. You don't roll into the organization where, to your point, people are somewhat skeptical or they have inherent fears or, whatever the organization is saying, well, I need 500 people, I need $500 million, 100,000 pounds, and I'm going to build a data enterprise and I need all these experts. No, the answer is no. No one really, up until this point in the last 2 or 3 years, no one really cared about data. You didn't hear a lot of a conversation around data management, lineage, data quality. It's only through the event of this rush and urgency and fear of the fourth industrial age, somebody actually said, oh shit, we have to use data, we need all of this stuff. So again, you start off small. I mean, if you're going to build a data team, start off small, deliver that incremental value, become a trusted partner in what you do within the scope that you've got yourself. Don't make the scope too big. And again, through that success, you will get the commitment, you will get the funding, you will get the appreciation, and you will get the support to incrementally grow that team into the different dimensions of the data, the whole data domain. You don't start off with saying, I need a data quality team and I need 5 experts that are worldwide certified to do data quality. Well, no. If you don't understand where your lineage is or what data you got and all of that, it's no use having a DQ team or for that matter, having a governance team if you don't even know what data you have. So you've got to start off with the fundamental basics and grow it through that exponential change. Not for one moment am I saying that you should just break it down to that simple analogy. But again, building any data team or any data ecosphere or organization within an organization, you've got to start off small and show value, because obviously a data organization is not necessarily an organization that demonstrates direct value to an organization. It's not a balance sheet. It's not like I'm selling cars and that car has made a profit. Therefore, how do I measure this data team? I deliver nothing besides the expertise, the knowledge, and the ability to consume data in an appropriate way. So in itself, that generating value has to be done in a different way. And the only way you can generate value is, again, in the eye of the beholder. How do people that are driving that aspects of the business that are profitable or have a bottom line in terms of profit and loss, how do they perceive how this data thing supports them? And through their eyes and commitment and trust, that you can grow your organization. But you can't do it in isolation of your businesses that are generating value.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
data does not generate value.
No.
The use of data generates value.
Where then in the eco, you talked about it, ecosphere of data, ecosystems, and so on. A lot of people often get caught up in building very large systems, building data lakes. This is the common buzzword has been going around for a long time. Let's build a data lake. Let's get our streaming capability in place now. Let's be, let's build something that's fit for the future, which I just don't, I don't agree with. I don't fundamentally understand it. Right now, we're in a position that we're in the unknown. How do you, as a leader, specifically in the data area, how do you cater for the unknown? It's probably a crazy question in terms of, but we're in pretty much a place where we've never been before.
Absolutely. And again, there's different dimensions of the question.
Yeah.
And I always come back to the framework of people, process, and technology. So how do you equip your people for the unknown? No one's got a crystal ball. I mean, if we had a crystal ball, we'd all be the top Forbes 100 most profitable companies in the world if we had crystal balls. But we don't have a crystal ball. So when you deal with people, so the question is, let's try and pose the question to people. How do you equip your people for the unknown, for the ambiguity, considering that you don't know what the answer is? You don't know what the outcome of the race is. Okay. This really is all the same. So when you look at your people things, prepare them with skills that can deal with the unknown and the ambiguity. So you deal them with, you equip them with skills of lateral thinking, out of the box thinking, problem solving. Try and teach them and build frameworks for looking at problems in a creative way. Equip them with skills that will enhance or reduce their fear for the unknown. So you equip them with skills that are best utilized to deal with unknowns. Lateral thinking. You have, I don't know, scenario planning and thinking. Teach them that. Play out scenarios. Teach them to have personal leadership in terms of sharing the ideas and their concerns. Teach them to communicate effectively. The things that help you from a people dimension in this world of ambiguity. Then we move on to the process. That how do I work? What do I do? The way you need to adapt, or look at that component of the dimension is you need to get into agile execution modes. You need to look at frameworks that can deliver an agile, rapid fashion and deploy. So there's a whole process of what you do that needs to be adjusted to more of an agile way of execution. Because if it's agile, you probably have a better shot at dealing with change. Okay, and not that I'm saying for a minute that agile is the silver bullet that will help you 100% of the time deal with this world of change and ambiguity. But certainly it's a lot better at dealing with uncertainty than, say, waterfall approaches of execution. Likewise, your business processes. Build and review your business problems and see how dynamic those business processes are. And is there resilience, and can those processes deal with ambiguity? So reviewed from a business perspective. Then when we land up on the technology side, how do I now prepare my technology landscape for ambiguity, for change, for uncertainty? Well, a lot of the technology we've deployed at Nedbank is technology agnostic, in a sense that I don't build hard dependencies into technology platforms, across technology platforms. I abstract that stuff and try and build a way of abstraction. So it's how you deal with your technology architectures is you can't build hard things into your architectures. It's got to be technology agnostic. It's got to be abstracted from one another. So you can change components of your technology enterprise without materially affecting the other components. So that's how you prepare your organization for change and ambiguity. You've got to look at it across, again, you have to look at it across all three dimensions. Are your people equipped with skills that are suitable for ambiguity and a rapid change in directions? I've mentioned some examples. Your processes, your business processes, your execution processes, are they resilient to change? Are they built in such a way that it can deliver rapid incremental value that can deal with rapid change and change in direction and change in perspectives? Then you look at your technology. Have you built your technology ecosphere and architectures in such a way that you haven't built dependencies between significant components in your architecture? Are your components in your architecture abstracted away from each other? Do you have API? Do you have sort of virtualized schema? Those are the things that one should be doing.
And I think
it's not about being, I'm now ready for the fourth industrial age. No one is ready for the fourth industrial age. But what you can do is focus on the dimensions that, regardless of journey, regardless of outcome, you have built agility, you have built resilience, and you've built stability in those
people knowledge as well. And I really like the fact that you talked about people first, the upskilling, getting them to think about things like scenario planning and so on, which is fundamental. I don't think enough people really do it. If I look at it, if I look at industries now, scenario planning is always left to people up there. So I think having that, base of people, running what I used to talk, running war games or whatever, which is, fun things when you scenario plan and so on, but it actually gets them thinking in that lateral way. And I think that's brilliant. Equally, the processes, understanding your business. But so many times I will walk into businesses and I will see fundamentally they don't document, understand, and look at the end-to-end processes in the way that you want to make sure that while you've got an end-to-end process, you can track that through with data as well and see what that data pipeline looks like and that lineage and see that end-to-end. So it's fundamental. I think those are the fundamentals. So great points. I love those points. Really, really cool points. And technology, being agnostic is absolutely true, and being able to spin things up without being dependent, on certain connections, and being locked in, which is what I see a lot of times as well. Funny enough, I'm working with a client now.
That's also where a lot of big transformation programs fail, is because they're going on a transformation. They're trying to transform an aspect of the business.
Yeah.
But when they start the transformation, they figure out very quickly that this thing that they're trying to transform is now hard coded into a whole bundle of other things.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have to transform that piece, which I want to, I now have to go backwards and transform all the other pieces. And this is why a lot of transformation programs either fail, they overrun extensively, or they cost exorbitant amount of money.
Yeah.
And the complexity in any organization, modern organization, is quite high, because they're dealing with different levels of legacy, they're dealing with different complexity, they're dealing with different velocities of business, they're dealing with different velocities of data, etc. Yeah. So when you look at a transformation, all of a sudden this thing now becomes a nightmare, because it's not easy to do anymore, because you're dealing with all these different facets that impede you, which is fine, but going into the new world, you can't be building anything to sustain you in the future that has impeded you in the past, exactly like you just said. You've got to build ability, you've got to build uncertainties. And that's what it's about at the end of the day. It's not about, how quickly you can do certain things and will I survive in 5? Well, is your business sustainable? If they are not, you're going to find that you're going to become laggards. And and if you believe our consulting peers and various other oracles in the data space, they quote some fanciful numbers, but let's assume they're right for a moment. They're saying you'll be obsolete in 3 years. Well,
I thought you were going to say 3 days. Hang on, you put the fear of God into everybody.
but that's what they say.
Yeah.
You read these comparisons on the top Forbes 100 companies, and they can do comparisons. 20 years ago, if you won the Forbes, your business was there typically for 15 years within the 100, the top 100. Now they do a cut last year. Now the average lifespan of a company in the Forbes top 100 is now 4 years, and they project. Now you get some clever data guy who's now doing an extrapolation to the future. and people, and you can't change the future, neither can you foretell the future.
No.
But people see, no, but if I follow this trend, this guy's just, and without questioning, and that means my lifespan as a top 100 company is going to be 12 months, which is rubbish. But
let's talk about that for a moment, actually, because you've mentioned a hype cycle, you've mentioned, you've mentioned hype, not hype cycle. I always, I love the Gartner hype cycles, wonderful things, and some years I see stuff on it, some years I don't, and things keep dropping off and coming back. But then you talked about trend, and those two things, I believe, are probably misguiding a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How have, one, there's nothing we can do about it. Everybody will talk about a trend, but as a leader in a business that's driving innovation through data, not particularly maybe from a regulatory point of view, but from a customer point of view, or from processing and other points of view. How do you keep people on track, especially in the C-suite and the board? How do you remind them that trends come and go, and what trends mean, and how they take us to this fruitful land which we never find or see? How do you what do you do in terms of keeping their feet on the ground?
Right. So the way I approach C-suites and how do you change that? Again, typically we talk about, in any modeling, we talk about probabilities and propensities, which by default in stats is that. So when we talk about trends, talking into the future, we never seem to apply the same logic. So the first thing I say to everybody going all these trends, the first thing is I ask them is, what's the probability of the trend? I understand you've called it a trend. I understand there's some gravity around it and understanding. What's the probability of it actually being something? And everybody sort of like slows down and says, make a good point. So, and you bring them, you try and ground them back into the everyday world. Yeah. And we work for a bank, so everything's about quants and probabilities and stats and trends. Like, I get you, but you're all accountants and you're all, trying to forecast. That's your job. But so let me ask you a question. You talk about all these trends. What's the probability of the trend taking place? And what do you mean, Paul? So 5 years ago, everybody said artificial reality was a trend. Well, actually, it didn't take off. Subsequently, it evolved into augmented reality and mixed realities. Now, there's an application there. I get it. Now it's becoming a thing. But we called it a trend in the past, but it wasn't a trend. So it had a very low probability of success, given the fact that most trends are founded in the basis of mass adoption. So for a trend to be a trend, it has to be adopted by the mass. Yep. It must have gravity behind it. Same reason why people, Paul, we got this quantum computing is a trend. It can't be a trend. And the probability of quantum computing actually being a trend is going to be very low, simply because of the cost barriers involved. And there'll be 4 or 5 people on the planet that'll have it and use it and get advantage of it. It doesn't mean it's a trend. So first you try and bring them down to that and say, let's be cautious, let's patience, understand. Don't execute something because people say it's a trend. Because in all probability, it won't be a trend simply because no one's got a crystal ball. And if you do talk about trend, talk about it with a dimension of probability. What is the probability of something like this actually being material as a trend? And when you start putting a little bit of reality into the room and rational thinking in the room, okay, now everybody's a little bit more comfortable. So you've dealt the fear. And again, it all comes on. Now they're a little bit more comfortable.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that.
That's the first thing how I would approach it.
Yeah. No, I see a lot of boards talking about AI now, and simply it's going to help them revolutionize their business, and it may well do, but not their entire business. So for me, it's always coming back to the point that you made earlier. Why is this trend going to help us? What is it going to do for us? Why is it going to change or radically do something different for our business? And I see that. But listen, we're coming up to the top of the hour. We've had a great discussion today. Listen, I just want to ask you, in terms of books that you've read, what has been, from a innovation, a data, or maybe just generally, what's the one book that you could say that has guided you or given you most thought processes about what you do today?
Well, again, very tricky question. Okay.
You can name a couple.
Well, for me, it's not about the books.
Yeah.
For me, it's about the books. What I find with books, and I don't have the time to read 1,000 gazillion books.
Sure.
I don't.
Sure.
So I read a lot of articles, white papers,
Okay.
things that are short, impactful, powerful. So I read a lot of thesis work. I read a lot of white paper positioning stuff. I also read a lot of blogs. And the reason why is the benefit of knowledge does not come in how much you know about a particular subject. It's not about that. The real benefit of knowledge and the innovation and the innovative thinking doesn't come through the depth of something. And what I tend to see in books is that they talk about a single particular topic and they go into a lot of depth. They're very vertical in nature. So you know everything about a balloon. If the book is about a balloon, you know everything about a balloon. Well, you probably find that 95 to 98% of the book is like irrelevant. You might find certain pieces that resonate with you. So the real, excuse me, the real innovation and thought processes comes about the span, how many different things you read. Do you read philosophy? Do you read medical journals? Do you read data? Do you read technology trends? Do you read manufacturing, biology, human evolution, cybersecurity? The real connection with a lot of innovation comes through joining the dots across a wide parameter and gambit of dimensions, plethora of that. So these books I read, generally I read books for my entertainment purposes. Okay? Because if I read books about how to manage a modern organization in the 21st century, and it's 500 pages, let's be honest. One, I don't have the time to read 1,000 pages about some guy, which is based on his perspective only.
But you're living it.
How you do it. It's like no value to me. There's like no value in it. So when I read books, I read it for my own personal enjoyment.
Okay.
When I'm reading for my professional, try and read things that are very specific, that get you information, that are punctual. So I find to meet that desire, I find published theses around the topic, published white papers around the topic, because they're not 5,000 pages.
Sure.
They obviously went through a professor of some degree, and it's pertinent. It's 180 pages, maybe maximum. Some are 80, but they're pertinent. They're succinct. They're to the point, and the innovation is diluted, and the thought processes are diluted. So when I read professionally, try and find things that are get to the point very quickly, but also try and read things that are diverse in nature, because the real understanding of the universe of data happens through multiple dimensions, not in one thing. And I don't personally know about you, just my I don't have time to read 1,000 pages on data quality.
Well, I think we all struggle. I think I'm like you. I used to read a lot, but nowadays I get to dip in and dip out, maybe of blogs or articles or just specific posts that I might see, even if they're not 300 pages long. But I think what I like and what I've heard is the fact that you've put an emphasis on, it's not just about data, it's about maybe tangential thinking. Maybe it's about philosophy. Maybe it's about psychology. Maybe it's about maybe it is about technology, or maybe it is about understanding what's been in the past, and really understanding where we've come from, as you said, the biology or whatever it might be. So actually these things to me are really important. So you've hit on such a really great view of the dynamic view or a holistic view of where we should be looking at, not just that narrowed view of data or organization or whatever it might be, but really expand the horizon, which I love. Listen, I think the last thing that I'm going to ask you is, as we wrap up, and it's a question I often ask myself. What is the future of the chief data officer and the future of that data leadership? Is there a future?
No, I don't think there is, and I'll tell you why. So we've got this notion. We're at this evolutionary point now with this data understanding. Everybody talks about it. Is data centric.
Yes.
We must be data centric.
Yes.
If we're data centric, obviously you do need somebody like a chief data officer, chief whatever, that looks after data, because you're trying to centralize. That's what in essence what it is. You're trying to find all information around a customer, all the systems. It's around centricity of data.
Yep.
Now, what people think is that's the end game. That's not the end game, because that's the start of the journey. Where I ultimately see a lot of these things is, don't become data centric. Become data aware.
Yes.
Now, when you're data aware, everybody in your organization has the relevant data knowledge, understanding, and commitment. Or your leaders all have the right understanding of data and its commitment and its influences. And if you're aware of it, and if I'm in a state of data awareness, and my organization, as I've just articulated, is in that space of maturity of data awareness, why would I need a chief data officer? Because everybody becomes a chief data officer.
Yeah.
So, and I think we mustn't get too hung up on those roles. And again, it's like scientists. One morning we didn't have any data scientists. Then everybody made a big thing of it. Then everybody's like, I'm a data scientist. Actually, you've always been a data scientist. We've had quants going back 40 years. What is it? And likewise with a chief data officer. What is a chief data officer? Well, have you not had it before? Are you not performing the role? And when you migrate from data centricity to data awareness, I would, in that context, I would then question, well, why do I need a data officer? Because everybody in themselves becomes a data officer. That's ultimately where you be. Your employees are all data officers. Your leadership is data officers. And they all bring the same passion, direction. Then you don't need someone to lead, because as soon as you put a leadership position in place, you're leading the dimension of an organization. So if data officers lead the dimension of data through data centricity. But when you get to a point where you do not have to lead, because everybody is a data officer, it might evolve into, I don't know, another form of a role, whoever our consultant peers decide is the next biggest thing. But certainly if everybody is data aware, why would you need a data officer? And that's just a question I would ask. My view, if your organization is now data aware and you've adopted data as your core, why do you need a data officer?
Paul Morley?
Does Netflix, let me ask you the question. Companies that deal with data and is the core of their data, does Netflix have a chief data officer?
That's a good question. I will have to look at that. But you see, I think it goes back to your point. They've been born out of that data language and being aware. I call it being data informed. You call it being data aware. But that is the point. So they've born up and been and grown on top of that. So essentially, everybody has been aware of it. Everybody's been passionate, and everybody's been thinking about data from day one. So where these companies who are late to the game are not thinking of data as day one, from day one. And they've been thinking about other things. And I don't naturally think that they should be thinking about data from day one, because their business is either about their manufacturing or about their customers or about their products. So actually, we should all have the data as a fabric, within organizations. I think it's just the heightening of what goes back to your opening. It's the value of it. It's how we can bring it to the table, what we can do with it, how we can utilize it, and how we can transform it into something that is going to help us achieve those objectives. Paul Morley, thank you so much today for your time. It's been wonderful. I loved your views on everything in terms of transformational change, the 3 points you made about the understanding of data, the fear, and the technology piece. And brilliant. I've had such a great time today. Thank you so much for giving me your time. And Sam, hopefully we can speak again.
Sam, it's always a pleasure to chat to you. And, we must talk more about in our data community about these points. That's the only way we're going to change the world, is to make it aware and talk. And it's been a pleasure chatting to you for an hour. I always enjoy our chats, and I also find it very informing. So thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you, Paul.